If you are hearing these words right now, know that this moment has been perfectly designed for you. You are not here by chance, and you certainly didn't stumble upon this video accidentally. This is a divine appointment. In this very moment, God, the creator of the universe, has personally orchestrated your presence here. You are not just a casual viewer, you are the chosen one to hear a life-changing message, a revelation that will shift your life in ways you cannot even imagine. Feel this, the same God who spoke the stars into existence, who set the course of the oceans, and who crafted every part of this universe, he has spoken over your life at this very moment. You are here because he wants you to know that your struggle does not define you. It is not the end of your story. In fact, it is the beginning of something greater than you've ever known. For too long, you've felt the weight of challenges, whether it's the burden of financial hardship, the frustration of not seeing progress, or the emotional toll that life has placed on you. But hear me now, that season is coming to an end. The darkness that has surrounded you, the doubts that have held you back, and the uncertainty that has clouded your path, it all ends today. God has declared over your life, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Jeremiah 29 verse 11. This isn't just some vague hope, it is a guaranteed promise. You are not meant for scarcity. You are not created for a life of struggle and hardship. You were chosen for overflowing abundance. What's coming for you is not just about what's material. It's about a supernatural provision that will change the very way you live. You've been waiting, praying, and seeking answers, but know this, what you've been praying for, what you've been hoping for, it's already on its way to you right now. Now is your time. The floodgates of heaven are opening, and what has been held back from you is finally being released. The opportunities you've been praying for, the resources you thought were out of reach, they are about to be in your hands. This is the moment. I want you to engage with this divine moment. Right now. Don't let it pass you by. Tap the like button, not just as an action, but as a powerful declaration that you are ready for the blessings that are about to pour into your life. Subscribe to this channel, because this is where God's promises are being spoken into existence. And in the comments below, type 777, the number of divine completion, the number that signifies your breakthrough, your abundance, your victory. When you type it, know that you are aligning yourself with the floodgates of heaven. You are declaring that today is your day. Your breakthrough is here, and you are stepping into a season of unimaginable blessing. You've been through so much. You've carried burdens that were never meant to be yours. The financial struggles, the endless cycle of uncertainty, the feeling that you've been trapped in a loop of scarcity, you're not alone. But right now, in this moment, everything is about to change. The chains of hardship that have bound you are starting to break. The weight you've been carrying, the struggles that have kept you in fear and doubt, are coming to an end. Can you feel the shift? It's happening now. God has been preparing you for this very moment. It's not by chance that you are hearing this message today. This is a divine appointment. Your time has come. This is the season where God moves in your life in a way that will alter the course of everything you've known. The struggles of the past will soon fade, replaced by the abundance that He has promised you. This is not a vague hope or wish, this is the fulfillment of a promise made by God Himself. In Jeremiah 29 verse 11, God declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." These are not just words on a page, they are God's declaration over your life. A declaration that no matter what has come before, no matter what struggles you've faced, God has been guiding you towards this moment. A moment where you step into the fullness of His promises, where your prosperity is assured, where the divine provision you've prayed for is now coming into your life. The wealth that is coming to you, the opportunities that are opening, are not the result of your own toil alone. Yes, you've worked hard, but now it's time to recognize something greater than your effort at play. This is God's provision. His resources are endless, and when you walk in alignment with His will, you step into a flow of blessings that never stops. God is not limited by the economy, by your job, or by human systems. His wealth is not bound by the world's standards. His provision for you is limitless, and it will come to you in ways you never expected. Consider the story of the widow in 1 Kings 17 verses 13 to 16. She was down to her last meal. She had no way of knowing how she would survive the famine. But when she obeyed the word of the Lord, when she stepped out in faith and gave what little she had to the prophet, the miracle happened. Her flour and oil never ran out. What seemed like the end of her story became the beginning of God's supernatural provision. Her obedience unlocked a divine flow of resources that sustained her through the hardest time of her life. And the same God who provided for her is the same God who is providing for you right now. So, I ask you today, are you ready to step into this divine abundance? Are you ready to leave behind the struggles of scarcity and enter into a season of overflow? It's time. God has already declared that the wealth you've been praying for is on its way. It's not coming from your effort alone, but from His divine hand, and it's coming in abundance. But here's the key, this wealth, this provision, requires your faith and your readiness to receive it. I invite you now to declare your readiness by typing, "I am ready for divine prosperity," in the comments below. This is not just a comment, it's a declaration, a step of faith, a statement that you are aligning yourself with God's will for abundance in your life. By typing these words, you are opening your heart to receive the provision that is already on its way. Now, let's take this a step further. This abundance isn't just about financial wealth. It's about every area of your life flourishing. It's about the healing of relationships, the restoration of health, and the alignment of your purpose. When God brings abundance into your life, He doesn't just touch one part of you, He transforms every part. This is a season where you move from surviving to thriving, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and financially. This is your moment to claim the wealth and the provision that God has already set aside for you. But it's not just about getting what you need, it's about becoming a vessel for even more. As God blesses you, He will call you to bless others. The wealth you receive is meant to impact the world, to spread His love, to create opportunities for those around you. So, I encourage you today to trust in His promise. Trust that what is coming is not just for you, but for the world around you. As you step into this new season of abundance, remember that your faith and your willingness to receive will unlock doors that no man can close. And with each step you take in faith, God will open the floodgates of heaven, pouring blessings into your life in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. You are stepping into a new chapter of divine prosperity, and it starts now. Keep declaring your readiness, and get ready for what's coming next. It's your time. Have you ever found yourself feeling stuck, like no matter how hard you work, the breakthrough you've been praying for seems just out of reach? Maybe you've spent countless sleepless nights, wondering if there is ever going to be a change in your financial situation. You might be wondering, when will this struggle end, or why does prosperity seem so far away? I want you to know this: God's provision is not bound by your efforts or the limitations of the world around you. It comes directly from Him. The truth is, true prosperity doesn't rely on human toil, circumstances, or worldly systems. It is a divine gift, ordained and provided by God. We've all been taught that prosperity comes from working harder, climbing the ladder, or trying to meet all the expectations of the world. But the reality is, God's abundance works differently. He has promised that He will provide for you, and His provision is not limited by the world's economy or your current situation. Consider the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. They had no food, no water, and no way of knowing where their next meal would come from. Yet, God, in His infinite wisdom, provided them with manna from heaven, Exodus 16 verse 4. This wasn't just a one-time event. Throughout history, God has shown that He is the ultimate provider. He fed Elijah during a time of famine using ravens, creatures who brought him food, 1 Kings 17 verse 6. And when Jesus faced a crowd of 5,000 hungry people, He he performed a miracle by feeding them with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21. These aren't just stories, they are real demonstrations of God's supernatural provision. Now, think about your own life. How many times have you felt like you were running out of resources, yet somehow, something always came through at just the right moment? Maybe it wasn't a literal raven bringing you food, but it could have been an unexpected job opportunity, a financial gift, or an act of kindness when you needed it the most. That's God working in your life, just as He worked in the lives of those in the Bible. But what does all this mean for you, right here, right now? It means that God has a plan for your prosperity, and His provision is not based on your human effort. It's not about what you can do in your own strength or how hard you can push yourself to make things happen. Instead, it's about trusting that God's economy is infinitely greater than anything the world offers. Your prosperity is already in motion. It's already set aside for you. All you need to do is step into it and trust God to provide. Think of it this way: when you stop trying to force your own way, you make space for God's abundant blessings. This is the moment where you transition from striving to receiving, from working tirelessly to resting in the assurance that God has already provided everything you need. Imagine the peace that comes from knowing that your provision isn't up to you alone. It's God's responsibility to take care of you, and He has promised to do so in ways you could never imagine. So, are you ready to step into the prosperity that God has already ordained for you? If you are, take a moment and reflect on this truth: you don't have to struggle anymore. God has already made a way. I invite you to acknowledge that this truth is for you. In the comments, type, "I trust in God's provision." By doing this, you are not just commenting, you are making a declaration that you believe in God's provision for your life. This simple declaration is the first step in aligning yourself with God's abundant plan. Remember, prosperity in God's kingdom isn't just about financial wealth. It's about the fullness of life, peace, joy, and the assurance that your needs are met, both physically and spiritually. Now is the time to claim that divine provision. You are stepping into a season where God's abundance will overflow in every area of your life. Doors that once seemed closed will swing open, and opportunities you never imagined will become a part of your reality. So, take a deep breath and step forward. Your prosperity is waiting for you. Are you ready to receive it? Have you ever felt the weight of uncertainty, worrying about where your next blessing would come from? How many times have you fought hard to make things work, only to find that the struggle never seemed to end? What if I told you that the burden of provision was never meant to be yours to bear alone? It's time for you to let go of that weight because God has already set aside your abundance. No more struggling. The endless chase for financial security and success can stop now. God's provision is not bound by earthly systems or economic cycles. It doesn't rely on human effort or manipulation, it is a supernatural flow, a river that never runs dry. God has been orchestrating your abundance, and He is calling you to step into it, to trust that the provision you've been waiting for is already on its way. Think about the Israelites in the wilderness, when God provided them with manna from heaven every single day. Despite being in the desert, a place where no one would expect abundance, God gave them exactly what they needed, when they needed it. They didn't have to labor for it, they simply had to trust and receive. This is how God's provision works in your life. It doesn't come from your labor, but from your faith and trust in Him. Imagine you're at the edge of a dry, barren land, hopeless and unsure where to turn next. Then, out of nowhere, a river begins to flow right in front of you, quenching your thirst and filling every need. That river of abundance is God's promise to you. It never runs dry, and all He asks is that you trust in Him. No matter what the world tells you, your prosperity is not limited by the economy. It's not even in the hands of men. It's in God's hands, and His resources are endless. Think of the story of the widow with a little oil and flour, 1 Kings 17 verses 8 to 16. She was at the end of her rope, yet when she chose to trust God and give what she had, she saw an overflow that sustained her and her family through a severe famine. In the natural world, it didn't make sense. But with God, miracles happen when we surrender our worries and trust His plan. How many times in your life have you found unexpected blessings showing up at the right moment? Maybe you've had opportunities open when you least expected them, or perhaps relief from a financial worry came just in time. This is not coincidence. This is God at work, fulfilling His promise to never leave you in lack. Now is the time to embrace the abundance that God has prepared for you. Step into the trust that God will provide, just as He always has. You are no longer required to carry the burden of providing for yourself alone. Trust in God's ability to meet every need you have. If you are ready to step into this new season of abundance, comment, "I am ready," below. This is your declaration of faith, a statement that you trust in God's provision and are ready to receive all He has prepared for you. Have you ever faced a time in life when everything seemed uncertain? Perhaps you found yourself questioning whether things will ever get better. Have you been waiting for a breakthrough, yet felt like you were stuck in a never-ending cycle of hardship? It's easy to forget in those moments that true confidence comes from knowing that God is the source of our provision, not the world, not our job, not our circumstances, but God alone. Just like the birds of the air, which never worry about where their next meal will come from, God has already ensured that your needs will be met. They don't work tirelessly, yet their needs are always provided for. And just as He cares for the birds, He will care for you. When you trust in God's provision, you're able to step back and recognize that your future isn't in your hands alone. God's provision is like a river that flows abundantly, never running dry. It's constant, it's flowing, and it's always available, waiting for us to take hold of it. Think about Sarah, a woman who struggled with infertility well into her old age. She had nearly given up on the dream of becoming a mother. Her circumstances were impossible by human standards, yet God's promise to her was not dependent on her age, not dependent on the timing, and not even dependent on human reasoning. When the moment was right, God provided. Sarah gave birth to a son, and her life was transformed by the fulfillment of God's miraculous promise. That's how God's provision works. It's not based on the odds or limitations we see. His provision comes because of His faithfulness, and His faithfulness is always bigger than any obstacle. Now think about the moments in your own life where you felt like you were up against an impossible situation. Were there times when everything seemed lost, but somehow, out of nowhere, a solution appeared? Maybe it was a phone call you didn't expect, a breakthrough at just the right moment, or a person who stepped into your life at the perfect time. Those moments were not coincidences. They were divine provisions, made possible by God's perfect timing. His provisions are not just about material needs, but extend to every area of your life, your emotional well-being, your relationships, and even your peace of mind. If you're reflecting on this, where in your life do you need to fully let go and trust in God's provision? Do you have areas of worry where you've been striving, trying to do everything on your own? God wants to take that burden from you. He wants you to have the confidence that comes from knowing His plan for you is already unfolding perfectly. The confidence to trust that His provision isn't just enough, but more than enough. It's not just about having enough money in your bank account, it's about walking through life knowing that God is already preparing the next step for you, that He is providing for you emotionally, spiritually, and physically, in ways you might not even realize. So I want to ask you today, what would happen if you let go of the stress of worrying about your future? What if you started living with the knowledge that God has already made a way for you, in your career, in your relationships, and in your health? What would it look like if you truly embraced the truth that your provision is already secured in God? This is where true confidence is born. It's not in yourself or your own strength, but in knowing that God's plan for you is far greater than anything you could achieve on your own. The struggles and uncertainties that have held you back are not what define you anymore. You are stepping into a new chapter of your life, one where you trust in the abundance that God has already provided. If you're ready to step into this new chapter, ready to walk in God's provision, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below and declare, "I embrace God's provision." This is not just a simple statement, it's an act of faith. It's a declaration that you are ready to fully trust in the divine abundance that God has already set in motion for you. By commenting, you are acknowledging that your provision is already secured in God's hands, and you are choosing to rest in His promises. As you make this declaration, ask yourself, what would your life look like if you truly let go of fear and embraced the trust that God is working on your behalf? Think about the peace you could experience when you know that everything is in His hands. Let this be the moment when you choose to move forward in confidence, trusting that the river of abundance will never run dry for you. Have you ever felt the weight of trying to control every aspect of your life? The need to have everything planned out, the constant striving to make things happen on your own. It's exhausting, isn't it? And yet, despite our best efforts, there are times when life just doesn't seem to go according to our plan. What if I told you that true peace comes not from controlling everything around you, but from surrendering it all to God? Releasing control is one of the hardest things we can do, especially when life feels uncertain or when we've invested so much time and energy into making something work. But here's the truth, the more you try to control your life, the more you invite stress, worry, and fear into your heart. It's like trying to hold on to something tightly, only to find that the tighter you hold, the more it slips away. God, however, invites you to surrender, to let go of your need for control, and to trust in His plan for you. By surrendering, you allow God to work in ways that are beyond your understanding, miracles that wouldn't happen if you were still clinging to your own way. When you stop trying to dictate every moment and instead place your trust in God, you open the door to miracles that only faith can bring. Think about the story of Peter walking on water. He stepped out of the boat in faith, trusting Jesus to carry him across the waves. But as soon as Peter looked away, he began to sink. His fear overtook his faith, and he tried to rely on his own strength. It's the same in our lives. As long as we try to control every situation, we miss the miracles God wants to bring us. But when we choose faith over fear, we see that the very things that seemed impossible suddenly become possible. This is why trusting God's timing is so essential. God's timing is always perfect, even when it feels like things are delayed, even when you can't see the path ahead. We are often in a rush, but God's plan unfolds exactly when it needs to. Sometimes, we think that we know when the right time is, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows what you need, and when you need it, far better than we do. His timing is never early, never late, it's always right on time. Take a moment and think, what areas of your life have you been trying to control too much? Maybe it's your career, your finances, or even your relationships. What would happen if you let go of the need to have everything figured out? What could you accomplish if you placed your trust in God's perfect timing instead of constantly trying to make things happen yourself? I invite you to think about it deeply. What if you stopped striving so hard and allowed God to guide you through each step? Surrender your plans to Him, trusting that He is already working on your behalf. Trust in His timing, knowing that He will never let you down. If you're ready to release the weight of control and fully trust God's timing in your life, I encourage you to comment below, I trust His timing. It's not just a statement, it's a declaration of faith, a promise to yourself and to God that you are ready to stop carrying the burden of control. It's a sign that you are choosing faith over fear and trusting that God is in control. In this moment, take a deep breath, let go of the fear that has held you back, and embrace the peace that comes from surrendering to God's plan. Your miracles are waiting, and they will unfold exactly as they should, at the perfect time. Trust Him, for He knows what's best for you. Have you ever felt the stirring in your heart, a sense that something bigger than yourself is guiding you, but you're not quite sure how to follow through? It's like standing at the crossroads of a decision, uncertain, yet knowing in your soul that God is calling you to act. Obedience to God's calling is not always easy, but it is the path that leads to true blessings and divine favor. Consider the story of Ruth, a woman whose obedience led her to a destiny greater than she could have ever imagined. Ruth could have chosen the path of fear and uncertainty when her husband died, but instead, she chose to follow Naomi, her mother-in-law, to an unfamiliar land, trusting in God's direction. Her act of obedience wasn't just a small step, it was a decision that set the stage for her to become the great-grandmother of King David, and ultimately, part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Can you imagine the blessings that followed Ruth's obedience, not just for her, but for generations to come? Ruth's story is a powerful reminder that obedience to God opens the doors to blessings and prosperity, doors that are often divinely orchestrated and beyond our understanding. God doesn't just throw opportunities our way randomly, He positions us for them, but it's up to us to trust His guidance and obey when He calls. Obedience isn't about blind compliance, it's about aligning our hearts with God's plan, knowing that His plans for us are always good, always filled with hope, and always leading us toward a future of abundance. Have you ever experienced God's provision through obedience? It may have been a moment when you stepped out in faith, even when it felt uncomfortable, and trusted that God would provide. Or perhaps you felt prompted to act on an opportunity, only to find that God had prepared the way before you. Think about a time when obedience led you to unexpected blessings. It could have been in your career, in your relationships, or even in your personal growth. I want to encourage you to take a moment and reflect on that. What doors have opened in your life as a result of following God's plan? How has your obedience led you to experience His provision in ways that you didn't expect? When we align ourselves with God's will, He doesn't just provide for us, He blesses us abundantly, just as He did for Ruth. If you've experienced God's provision through your obedience, I invite you to comment below and share your story. Let us know how obedience has made a difference in your life and how you've seen His divine favor unfold in unexpected ways. Your story could be the encouragement someone else needs to step out in faith and trust God's plan for their life. Remember, God is positioning you right now, just as He positioned Ruth. The doors of prosperity are already being opened, and your obedience is the key that unlocks them. Trust that God's timing is perfect, His plan is good, and His blessings are abundant for those who walk in obedience to Him. Have you ever wondered why God blesses us with wealth? Is it simply for personal enjoyment, or is there something greater at work? God's provision is not just about meeting our own needs, it's about empowering us to fulfill a higher purpose, His kingdom purpose. The wealth that God provides is a tool to impact the world for His glory, to serve others, and to further His work here on earth. Just imagine for a moment the impact you could have with the resources God has entrusted to you. Wealth in the hands of those who understand its kingdom purpose becomes a vessel for transformation. It allows us to sow into ministries, uplift communities, help those in need, and contribute to the expansion of God's kingdom. God doesn't want us to hoard our blessings, He calls us to use them to bring His light into the world, to be a living example of His love and provision. The principle of generosity is woven throughout the Bible, and it's more than just a nice idea, it's a spiritual law that activates God's blessings in our lives. Proverbs 11 verse 25 says, "A generous person will prosper, whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." This isn't just a proverb, it's a kingdom principle. When we give, we don't just help others, we position ourselves for an even greater outpouring of blessings. Generosity opens the door for God to bless us beyond what we can imagine. Take a moment to reflect on how generosity has impacted your life. Has there ever been a time when you gave, whether through money, time, or resources, and felt an outpouring of blessings in return? How has your giving created opportunities for you to experience God's abundant provision? God's provision isn't meant for us to keep to ourselves, it's meant to be shared. The more we give, the more God will provide. It's the beautiful cycle of sowing and reaping. The more we sow into His kingdom, the more He will bless us, not only with wealth but with peace, joy, and purpose. Generosity doesn't just change the lives of others, it transforms our own hearts, bringing us closer to God's own heart of compassion and love for others. I encourage you today to take a moment and reflect on your own purpose in God's plan. How can you use the resources and wealth God has given you for His glory? Perhaps it's supporting a cause you care about, helping someone in need, or investing in a ministry that spreads the gospel. Whatever it is, know that your wealth has the potential to change lives and make a lasting impact in His kingdom. If you feel led, share in the comments how you plan to use your wealth for God's kingdom. How can you be a blessing to others with the resources God has entrusted to you? Your story might inspire someone else to reflect on their own role in kingdom work, and together, we can create a movement of generosity that glorifies God and transforms lives. God's provision is not about us, it's about His kingdom, and when we align ourselves with His plan, we will experience the abundance He promises. As we give generously, we open ourselves to an even greater flow of blessings, both for ourselves and for the world around us. Divine prosperity is more than just the accumulation of financial resources. It is a reflection of God's favor in all areas of life: your health, your relationships, your peace of mind, and your purpose. True wealth in God's kingdom is holistic. It touches every aspect of your life and radiates His goodness and provision. When you are walking in His divine prosperity, it isn't just about what you own or what you can buy, it's about the overflow of blessings that reach beyond material possessions. It is the peace, joy, and purpose that flood your life, knowing that you are living in the fullness of God's provision. Living under God's provision means living with confidence. Confidence that you are not dependent on the world's economy, not ruled by the uncertainties of life, and certainly not bound by fear. You have a Father who is deeply invested in your well-being, and His plans for you are perfect. Just as a child does not worry about their parents' ability to provide, we too can trust that God is taking care of every detail of our lives. We are not meant to live in constant anxiety or fear about what tomorrow will bring. God's provision is constant, and His promises are unwavering. As we trust in Him, we can confidently step into the abundant life He has already prepared for us. Think for a moment, how would your life change if you truly embraced the fullness of God's provision? How different would it feel to walk in the confidence that everything you need is already provided, and that God's plan is unfolding in perfect timing? Imagine living with the peace that comes from knowing you are fully cared for, fully provided for, and completely loved. This is the life God wants for you, one that reflects His abundance, not just in wealth, but in every part of who you are. As you embrace the wealth of God's kingdom, you are not just receiving material blessings, you are stepping into a life of purpose, abundance, and divine favor. You are moving forward, knowing that God's plan for you is greater than you could ever imagine. And as you do, the world around you will see the evidence of His blessings, not just in your finances, but in your life, your relationships, and your testimony. Now is the time to embrace the fullness of divine wealth, to receive everything God has for you, and to trust that you are walking into a season of abundance that will overflow into every area of your life. If you are ready to step into that divine abundance, I encourage you to comment below with the phrase, "I am walking into my divine abundance." Declare it with faith, and know that as you speak it, you are aligning yourself with God's promises for your life. You are stepping into the fullness of His provision, and the abundance that awaits you will be greater than anything you've imagined. Let your declaration be the beginning of a new chapter, one where you live in confidence, freedom, and divine prosperity. The role of faith in receiving God's blessings cannot be overstated. Blessings are not just handed to us on our own terms, they come when we align ourselves with God's perfect timing and trust in His sovereignty. God's plan for your life is far greater than anything you could have ever imagined or planned for yourself. His timing is flawless, and when we surrender our own timeline and lean into His, we open ourselves to receiving blessings in ways we couldn't have anticipated. The secret to unlocking the abundance that God has in store for you is trusting Him fully and waiting with patience for the doors to open when the time is right. Have you ever experienced a moment in your life where you realized that the things you were waiting for were delayed for a reason? Perhaps the job you thought you were meant to have slipped away, only for a better opportunity to arise later. Or maybe a relationship you were eager to begin took time to grow, and in hindsight, you saw the wisdom in God's timing. God's timing is always intentional, and even in the waiting, He is preparing you for something greater. In Isaiah 43 verse 19, God declares, "I am making a way in the wilderness." This speaks of God working behind the scenes, preparing paths where we can't yet see. Even when it feels like things are stagnant or not moving forward, God is at work, shaping the circumstances, clearing obstacles, and leading you toward divine abundance. Just like in the wilderness, when the Israelites felt lost and unsure, God was preparing the way for them to enter the promised land. Similarly, God is working on your behalf, orchestrating everything to fall into place at the right moment. Have you ever felt like you're walking through a wilderness, unsure of what comes next, yet somehow still feeling a sense of peace? That is God at work, paving the way. He is leading you, even when the path seems unclear. And though it may not seem like it now, this period of waiting is not a time of wasted time, but preparation for the abundance He has already promised you. The secret of divine timing and abundance is learning to trust that God is always working, even when we can't see the full picture. When we stop trying to control the situation and fully trust that He has a plan for us, we open the door to the blessings He's been preparing. It's about moving in faith, believing that even the setbacks are stepping stones for the greater things God has in store. Are you ready to trust God's timing? Are you prepared to release the pressure of having everything happen on your own timeline and allow Him to work things out for you? When you align yourself with His will and trust His process, the divine abundance that awaits you will manifest in ways that will amaze you. If you are ready to trust God's perfect timing, I invite you to comment below and declare your faith by typing, "I trust in God's perfect timing." Let this declaration be the start of a new level of faith and expectancy in your life. Trust that God is working behind the scenes to bring about the breakthrough you've been waiting for. His timing is perfect, and you are about to see how everything comes together according to His plan. Remember, your journey is not random, it's part of God's divine orchestration. Hold on to your faith, for His plans for you are greater than any delay or detour. Faith and obedience are the keys to unlocking the divine opportunities that God has set aside just for you. When we think of the incredible blessings that come through obedience, we can look no further than the story of Ruth. Ruth, a woman who faced immense hardship, chose faith and obedience when she decided to follow Naomi back to Bethlehem. Despite her personal loss and uncertain future, she trusted in God's plan. And through her unwavering commitment, she found herself standing at the threshold of divine opportunity. Ruth's obedience led her straight into the fields of Boaz, where she would not only find favor but also become part of the lineage of David, and eventually the lineage of Jesus Christ. Her simple step of faith and following God's guidance placed her in the exact position to receive blessings beyond her wildest imagination. Ruth's story serves as a powerful reminder that obedience opens doors that we could never have opened on our own. Now, think about your own life. Are there areas where you have been hesitant to step forward in obedience? Maybe it's a new opportunity you're unsure about or a calling you felt deep within, but haven't fully embraced. Divine wealth and provision often follow when we align ourselves with God's will, stepping out in faith, trusting that He has a greater purpose for our lives than we could ever understand. God's provision doesn't always look like what we expect, but it always arrives at the right moment and in the right way. Divine wealth isn't just about financial prosperity, it's about being in alignment with God's purpose. When we walk in faith and obedience, we position ourselves for a life of abundance that touches every area: emotional, relational, spiritual, and yes, material as well. It's in the moments where we surrender control and step boldly into opportunities that God has prepared for us that the doors to divine wealth swing wide open. God is positioning you for your breakthrough, and it's time to step into the opportunities He's been preparing you for. These opportunities may look different from what you imagined, but they are part of a greater plan. Do you feel that stirring in your heart? That call to step into something greater? That's God's invitation for you to step into your divine opportunities. If you're ready to step into the divine opportunities that God has prepared for you, I encourage you to comment below with, "I step into my divine opportunities." Let this be your declaration of faith. Share this video with others who may be waiting for their own divine opportunities to unfold. Together, let's walk boldly into the blessings that God has already ordained for us. Remember, obedience isn't always easy, but it always leads to divine reward. God is opening doors, and it's your time to step through them. As we come to the close of this message, it's important to understand that God's blessings are not limited to material wealth. His provision flows abundantly into every area of your life. The overflow of His blessings reaches far beyond finances. It encompasses spiritual growth, emotional healing, and the restoration of relationships. When you step into God's divine provision, it overflows, bringing fullness to every aspect of your life. God's overflowing blessings aren't just about having enough to meet your needs, they're about living a life of abundance, where there's more than enough. Imagine a river that doesn't just sustain you, but surrounds you, touching every corner of your life with peace, joy, and fulfillment. This is the life God has called you to live, one where you have more than enough not only for yourself but to bless others, to serve His kingdom, and to bring His love to those around you. Living in this overflow of God's provision means walking in peace and confidence, knowing that you no longer have to fight for what you need. You no longer have to struggle or strive to make things happen on your own. God has already made a way. He has already provided for you. You can walk in the assurance that, no matter what challenges come your way, He is always working behind the scenes to bring about your good. The peace that comes from knowing that you are taken care of by the Creator of the universe is like no other. When you embrace this truth, everything shifts. You walk through each day with a confidence that isn't shaken by the world's circumstances or your fears. Instead, you walk with faith and expectation, knowing that God's provision is always present, always sufficient, and always overflowing. Now, I invite you to make a bold declaration. Comment below with, "I receive my divine wealth," not just as a statement, but as a declaration of your faith. Let this be your affirmation that you are ready to embrace the fullness of God's provision in every area of your life. And as you share this message, let it bless others. Share it with someone who needs to hear that God's overflow of divine provision is real, and it's available for them, too. As you step into your divine wealth, remember, God's plan for you is greater than anything you could ever imagine. Live in the overflow of His blessings and share His love with others. Trust that He will continue to provide for you in ways you never expected.